the book was given to me to read, and that was a book by Walter Tevis. Science fiction at that time, I thought, it's rather interesting. You can do what you like with science fiction. Gradually it's opened up all kind of doors, you know, that it became, in my head, the only real fiction. Well, I've never been a political filmmaker, but it's true, it does reflect that now, but maybe I was just understanding that, but not by deliberately thinking in terms of politics, but the politics of it has in fact happened, you know. On the radio this morning and yesterday, the whole thing about global warming and water disappearing. Well, the only reason he comes to look for water, he's going looking for water. Well, maybe we'll go somewhere looking for water ourselves. But so I think that's quite exciting. I saw David Bowie in a BBC documentary, Cracked Actor, I think it was called, and he interested. I thought, this is really an interesting guy. He was slightly to one side of expectation, of people's expectation, and I went to see him, and I did like the idea of this not. He had another kind of popularity, you know. It wasn't the obvious popularity, and it wasn't some sort of ultra strange or something that, you know, like some heavy metal, you know, dressed up. But it was different, separate. And I went to see him in New York, and we talked. Actually, I hung around for a long time, very badly, and. But he came in and he said, yeah, very quickly. I waited, it was about 1 o'clock in the morning, actually. Went to meet him at his house. I think he was renting. He was in a recording studio. Got back about 1 o'clock and I thought, well, okay, we can't. He said, well, we don't really need to talk about it. Yes, I'd like to do it. And it was done.
The man who fell to earth. And you play in this movie, you play part of extraterrestrial.
Yeah, yes, I think it's an analogy more than anything else. Nick Roeg believes in using the area of science fiction to portray inner space rather than outer space, but they use the equipment and the utensils of outer space.
Yvan, did you like your part in this movie? Avez-vous aimé votre rôle dans ce film? Because you were laughing when you saw the picture. Vous avez ri quand vous avez regardé les images.
Well, because no time was allowed to show any emotion. And I'd learned to speak by watching television, and so everything was very stunted. And I used to end up in the day with a face that hurt because I couldn't move any muscles.
You are now 30, vous avez maintenant 30 ans. 10 years of success, 10 ans de succès, at the top, au top, c'est-à-dire au sommet. You will change your career now with the movies or leaving the songs?
That's the only change I think I'm finding that I'm making is that I'm not doing so much. I'm keeping things a lot quieter.
So you live in Berlin now?
No, I live in Switzerland, but I work in Berlin a lot.
Why Switzerland? Pourquoi la Suisse?
I often ask myself. I want to spend, I'd like to spend really 2 years in a different country for the rest of my life.
This face you present today is the right face now, or you will change again?
I think so. Well, it's a face that I've had for a long time. I usually am like this, I think. I haven't used a sort of exaggerated stage makeup for a long time, for 4 years. Before I was amalgamating the idea of kabuki theatre makeup with expressionism and trying to develop something for rock theatre. So it seemed quite bizarre, I think, to the West at those days, but now I think it's pretty commonplace, isn't it?
You like always Jacques Brel?
I like
Vous aimez toujours Jacques Brel?
Yes, I like him very much indeed. Yeah.
Did you meet him? Est-ce que
Never.
vous l'avez rencontré?
Never.
You tried to make him?
Yes,
vous avez
but
essayé de le rencontrer? Oui.
No, I think about 2-3 years ago.
Il y a 2 ou 3 ans, j'ai essayé de le rencontrer.
Yeah.
Why you like Brel?
I like
Pourquoi vous l'aimez?
I like the meat of the songs. I like
J'aime bien ce qu'il dit dans ses chansons.
the quality of writing is superb. For me, I like that kind of narrative song very much.
You understand French? Vous comprenez le français?
No,
Non, pas du tout.
no, nothing.
Rien du tout.
I can say arigato in Japanese, but that's all the languages I know.
Je peux parler Now, after your last album, après votre dernier album, what you will do in the song world? Qu'allez-vous faire dans le monde de la chanson?
Well, it seems I'm singing less on my albums because I don't think I have anything to say anymore.
Je n'ai plus rien à dire.
No, so I convert just a feeling into music. So a lot of instrumental things from now on, I think. Rather like the last album, but even more so.
How long you stay in Paris?
I think until Friday. And after, then I have to go to Berlin to finish my album. I'm working with Brian Eno. And then I go to Vienna to start filming.
What kind of movie?
I'm playing Egon Schiele, the Expressionist painter.
Which one?
Egon Schiele.
Egon Schiele.
1910, a pupil of Klimt.
I say to you, thank you, David Bowie, to be here today. Je vous remercie d'être là aujourd'hui. And
thank you, it was my pleasure.
To see you for a concert in Paris.
Yes, February next year.
Well, David Bowie certainly has always been outside any sort of trend, much more than any star, rock star or singing star. I think he has much more of a unique quality to him, for me. And I didn't know him, except, as I say, when I first met him, he just said, I think I'll do it, and then left, said good night. I've been waiting about 4.5 hours. The very first day, I think the first day was quite interesting, that because we've shot the scene where he walks into town, I think that was the first day with him. He walks into town, nice easy thing, walks into town. And by chance, there'd been a man we were shooting just on the outskirts of this little town in the Midwest, and there was a children's fairground, and they had a little roundabout with little tubular, like rocket ships that went dee round. It was deserted, and I thought rather nice to have him walk by that little fairground. It looked like a rocket. It was completely deserted, there wasn't anything there. And he said, yeah, that's all right, yeah. When he was walking along, and out of one of the little rocket boats, a man set up. It was like a bomb. And he looked and belched like that, and then slid down into the thing and disappeared again. Brilliantly. Because also another little rule that don't cut, no one says cut. And the operator looked at me. David never, he looked at it over that, looked back and walked on. He didn't question it. And afterwards, I said, we didn't. He said, well, I didn't think you did. Rehearse that. We didn't rehearse that. And it was marvelous from there. He had, this guy doesn't need a lot of talk. He overrode that sense of trying to please someone or their expectations. He kept in the sense of the part for quite a time afterwards. He was extraordinary.
I had met Nick Roeg in the mid-'60s when he was the DP on Truffaut's Fahrenheit 451. And I had gotten the rights to A Clockwork Orange in 1966, I guess. And Nick had also been second unit on Lawrence of Arabia, Dr. Zhivago, a lot of other things. Photographed, one of the most beautifully photographed pictures I'd ever seen, apart from the madding crowd. And we became very close, and I thought about him and about directing Clockwork Orange. But nobody was going to finance that project with Nick Roeg. And I was dating Candy Clark at the time occasionally, and I got Nick a date with a beautiful actress, and at the end of the evening, he asked if we could switch. And I agreed because it was all very casual, but he started having a romance with Candy.
He said, hey, would you like to read a script? And it's kind of interesting. And I said, sure. And I read it and I said, this is a fantastic story. You know, and he said, do you want to do it? And I said, yeah.
One day when I was visiting the hotel where Nick was at, and Candy was there with him, he asked if I'd like to read a screenplay that he was interested in. And it was written by Paul Mayersberg, and I read it right then and there. And they got very excited. Nick said, do you want to produce it? And I said, yes. Nobody wanted to do it until Michael Dealey and Barry Spikings, who had bought a company called British Lion.
They liked it. They said, let's do it. You know, so before they know it, they've got a strange film on their hands. Who ordered this movie? I don't like it. How did this get made?
Then he told me Candy had committed to be in it, and that was the starting point.
I had the script for about 6 or 8 months before they cast David Bowie.
I was in London, and Maggie Abbott, who I knew quite well, was an agent at ICM. And she was David's agent at the time. She represented all the boutique people who are not necessarily known as actors or movie stars.
He was cast perfectly. He was the man who fell to earth, and he looked the part. He was just at the height of his beauty.
Bowie's side, go! So next thing, I'm on the plane by the following week. You know, there was no like, go and look at New Mexico, see what you come back with, my boy. Another factor comes in. They were one of the first states to declare a right-to-work state. We brought in a whole English crew. A charter plane came by Chicago, and the entire British crew of lads turned up in Albuquerque, you know.
It was an idea I had that since Nick had a hot picture in London, since David Bowie was English, since the screenwriter was English, the essential crew, all of whom had worked for me or for Nick or for both of us in England, were part of a family. Brian Eatwell and his wife, Mae Ruth, who's a costume designer, and Linda DeVetta, who was Tony Richmond's wife then, was makeup. She's still doing movies, big ones. And David's son, Zoe Bowie, was there during the shoot, playing with my 2 boys who were with me that summer. In England, you're used to rainy days with sunny intervals. In the desert, it was sunny, hot days with rainy intervals.
The whole crew was pretty in sync. Well, I think we knew we were doing something rather special.
We had to bring British electricians and grips, and it was a whole roadshow came over, and we were traveling the country. It was wonderful, wonderful. But we were aliens.
And I liked the idea that English in America are very alien-like because we have that mutual language.
My favorite thing in the movie is the little scene where Rip drives out to him in the desert. He's in that little house, and he says to him, you know, and he realizes he's an alien. Well, where do you come from? And Bowie stands outside and he just looks down to the ground. He says, I'm going to somewhere down there.
It's very difficult to avoid someone knowing things about you that you didn't want anybody to know. Some years ago, I was in Haiti, and I thought, this is fantastic. I wanted to go somewhere that nobody could possibly know where I was. I just wanted to have some sense of being away, that not, oh, where's Nick? Oh, he's in Haiti. So it was a month, secret month of my own, for any reason at all, or for any sort of hidden agenda. And you can't believe this, but about a week later, someone said, how do you like Haiti, Nick? Haven't been. I said, because a director, another director, was booking in, when I was leaving, was booking into the suite that was next to mine, I couldn't believe it.
I loved working with David Bowie, and luckily I hadn't seen him in concert, so I wasn't starstruck by him.
Well, it's terrific because he had tremendously good thoughts about the piece, but he had put himself very much into the into the movie, into my hands. I guess sounds arrogant. I mean, he trusted me.
He didn't find it difficult to understand Nick Roeg. Nick Roeg speaks very plainly and not complicated. He's got a very down-to-earth way of telling you what he wants. I thought he looked like he was from another planet, and so it was really easy to pretend that he was from another planet.
I was very green to the industry and hadn't realized that you have to go through all of his people that he had to look after him before you actually got to him. But when you did, he was absolutely wonderful. The first suggestion where he does turn up, I think came from Nick, and that was the idea that he would like him to wear something as different in America as a duffel coat. And I think for David, I shopped, because he was tiny, I mean very thin. I think I bought a lot of boys' clothes for him, like shirts were very often like, and he wanted to have a feeling that was almost like a school uniform. The thing about him which was breathtaking, that whatever he put on, he looked wonderful. So I mean, when you talk about sculpting Newton, when he comes from the other planet, that we discussed with Nick, and I always remember being thrown completely by his suggestion, was that he said that he had to wear what they would wear would be their most precious commodity that they had on that planet, which was water, because they were dying of starvation. And I remember absolutely confused about sitting down and really then starting to draw, so it did look like the arteries of the body were on the outside of the body. But instead of it being red, it was all going to be white.
We had these very sheer, head-to-toe costumes with little hoods, little tight hoods, and then we had these tanks on our backs with this tubing with this pink liquid going through it, and we were springing leaks all over the place. And we also had these cat's eye lenses on our eyes, these full eyeball contact lenses that you couldn't see through at all, and they kept twisting and turning sideways and everything. It was a little shocking to see myself as an old person. The first time I actually looked in the mirror, when I got to the set, I started crying because I looked like my mother.
Merry Christmas.
His time was different from our time. Again, it was like a butterfly being friendly with, some dormouse or something. That two different. The sense of time is completely different, and so it was difficult that people were aging and he wasn't, But you do get a sense that it takes place over considerable time. There are basics, of the grammar of film, but it's to be used as the grammar of a language is to be used, and words.
We decided to fracture our grammar and take a few more risks with it.
It took a long time for that basic grammar of film to be understood, when it was first made.
I think he felt that what was going on in David Bowie's head was definitely not linear. He was not perceiving things the way necessarily that humans were. So we had to find a way to illustrate that.
It's part of him. I mean, he's really chops and things, changes things around, puts things in different places, different images.
Sometimes you scratch surfaces too much that people don't want to be touched in that way. They reject that idea or they don't see it. And I would think, they'll love it. That's something they haven't seen. It hasn't been touched on. That's literature is different because you take it personally to yourself and have a look at it. With a movie, they're all seeing one person's vision.
Well, one of the exciting things about this from the beginning was the fact of David's great popularity in the music world and as an icon all over the world. And so the fact that he was going to do the music meant that he was going to have to do it while the shoot was on.
Would be changing roles. He would then be part of, Mr. Newton wasn't a composer and he wasn't a filmmaker, he was Mr. Newton.
The original deal we made with David and Bobby Lippman, who became David's agent, is RCA, which was to do the soundtrack, would pay for it. I think it was $250,000, and that would be David's fee. A pittance sounds like a lot of money, but it's a pittance compared to what salaries are now, what fees are now, and also what he made as a rock star. When I finally heard the soundtrack, I thought it was remarkable. David is one of those Renaissance people. He can do anything, as he's shown. Well, as you know, the soundtrack is now the album that David did called Low.
In the first rough cut, I temp scored the movie entirely with Pink Floyd music, mostly with Dark Side of the Moon. It worked brilliantly. I mean, I thought, for me anyway, I thought it was just, it complemented the picture enormously and gave it this enormous time spread to me. It felt like an eternity because of the style of the Pink Floyd music. Not surprisingly, at that time, and probably now, it was horrendously expensive to buy.
It wasn't an instant overnight box office BO, but it builds and it was seen. But by that time, it's spread out. You know, the companies that distribute it have films that don't do well or do well, and then they want to hide the films that do very well, and so they shift the money off those films into something else.
He used to quote Voltaire all the time and say, "I am not interested in the triumph of the immediate." It used to be his motto. He was talking about making a movie in such a way that when our sons, when they saw this movie, they wouldn't find it old-fashioned, old hat, that it would have a newness to it.
He's a little advanced. His style and his editing style is a little ahead of its time.
I mean, it's way ahead of its time.
I love it. And each time I see other things in it which I hadn't noticed before.
I do think that the best films for me are the ones that require a little work on the part of the viewer. And Nick's films always require that.
That's what makes him Nick Roeg. I mean, he's a brilliant man, brilliant director. He's my favourite director to work with, without any shadow of a doubt.
I think that's Nick. I think if he's given a script, and over the years he must have had plenty, I think, my opinion, if something shrieks of commercial success, it'll reject it.
I think his work is fascinating, and I think that's actually a compliment not to be in the mainstream.
It's amazing any movies are made that because none of them make any money. So I mean, it must be these sort of marvelous charity people that do it, that put the money up, because none of them make any money.